Alright, time for Fullest House, first edition, where we are playing Vaettiheim. It is turn 55. We're going to be trying to storm Pangaea again. That has been a difficult task this game. But before we get to that, we finish research in Blood Magic, level 8. I think this is mostly for life, although I'm less familiar with Blood Magic, but it should give us some useful things. Next, we're going for Thaumaturgy. I actually thought I already had Charm, but that is in a different game. So Charm is at Thaumaturgy level 7. That is the main reason we're headed there, though plenty of useful spells along the way as well. We try to bind an Archdevil, and we do manage to get one, so they're not all summoned. These guys, prefer things to be hot, which is not really how Vaettiheim rolls, but most of the nations in this game that are left, other than Utgard, do seem to have taken heat scales, so we're going to be fighting in plenty of hot areas, and I do think we're going to be able to utilize this guy. Otherwise, bringing in more demons, more great eagles. We're finally summoning a bishop fish as threatened. We are going to want a decent number of these guys. There is some possibility of us throne rushing. We're not quite to that point yet, but we do actually border a good number of thrones, and if we manage to attack in a lot of places simultaneously, we might be able to get into a position, assuming we have enough bishop fishes, where we make a pretty big jump. And while our neighbors are probably going to be somewhat aware of the danger, the world at large might not be ready, right? They might be thinking that they have more time than they do. So yeah, we're going to summon up a couple more of these bishop fish probably, although we don't have a great water income. But they'll also be quite nice for blessing any, we have, at this point we have a couple separate groups of Rimvetti, and that'll probably just continue to get more groups of Rimvetti, because as they move farther away from the capital, it just gets harder and harder to shuffle out reinforcements to them. And I think we may have lost our prophet as well, so we don't even have a Holy 3 at this point, I think, other than this bishop fish that we just grabbed. So we try to do some remote site searching for fire. That does not work out. Our regular site searching also does not work out. Yeah, this is really, our site searching has not been going well lately. Late age is a bit rough for that. Our blood hunting is going all right. I have been talking about expanding. I do think we're starting to build up some blood 2s in our capital. So yeah, we just have to figure out exactly where we're going to send the next group. But we definitely are planning on expanding to another province. Some of these provinces are probably starting to get a little low in terms of population, so we'll have to take a look at that. This is an interesting result, so we'll have to see why this is so low. Maybe there's a lot of unrest. But possibly also it is time to move on from some of these provinces. And then, yeah, I think these are actually all fort storms. So Raga at this point has gone AI, and, this has just been locked down by a Scrotty. And speaking of Scrotty, looks like there's at least a couple Scrotty thugs here, one of whom has a lifelong protection, all of whom have a good amount of kit, quite a few heroes in here as well, so we'll definitely have to think about, how we're going to kill these Scrotty if we end up going up against Utgard. And then there's also a communion going up. Let's see, a divine blessing. Quite a few of their sacreds here. Yeah, not a particularly fearsome bless, although recuperation is really quite nice. But I do think this is more focused on their thugs. Not that, gam herdings are always going to be dangerous. Oof. Yeah, that's the problem. Ladies in robes. There's mass regeneration, maybe mass protection as well. No, it doesn't look like it. Looks like the battlefield wide was Serpent's Blessing, because, we do see foul vapors going up here. But that does mean that these mages, these arrows are going to continue to be extremely dangerous. So there's definitely going to be some mage losses. In terms of what Raga has, just, random stuff that the computer has summoned. And, a decent number of mages, but, no plan, no rhyme, no reason. That's how the computer rolls. And there's probably not a lot of poison resistance back here. In fact, yeah, and Utgard actually has this Yedden. So Raga knows the Yedden, so Utgard has managed probably to charm some. And just sending in a ton of giants, and looks like the communion was probably mostly for the battlefield-wide buffs like mass regeneration and things like that, but has now switched into skeleton spam. The skeleton spam is going to be pretty irrelevant in this battle, I think, because they're just not going to be able to get through the gap. Fort assaults are always kind of nasty. And here's Raga's Pretender, and a ton of kit on this fellow, although most of it not super useful for them. But still, they managed to more or less deal with the Zayden, it looks like, and, they've summoned out some lesser lesser fire elementals, and like, yeah, they're gonna get some kills. I think the worst part for Utgard for this battle is going to be the loss of their mages. So, you know, I think it's just a matter of time, yeah, before they take everything out. Not a particularly difficult storm, but yeah, wow. A lot of mage losses considering. I mean, otherwise pretty irrelevant losses, but, you know, these are relatively cheap mages. You know, they pop out relatively quickly. They recruit anywhere, so even losing 11 of them isn't the end of the world, but that does have to sting a little bit considering that they're kind of just up against random garbage from the computer. And something to consider for ourselves, I don't think Utgard really gets easy access to air magic, and, you know, I mean, we can recruit crossbowmen, so if Utgard doesn't manage to put down like a turn 1 mass protection, and even if they do put down a turn 1 mass protection, like 10 protection on 9 hit point mages against crossbow bolts still isn't going to be enough. So possibly, you know, recruiting groups of crossbowmen even relatively late into the game would be useful for us if we're fighting against Utgard. Still, you know, Utgard comes away with a capital, so they have to be happy about that. And, you know, here we are critiquing Utgard's storm, but here we are storming for a second time. And we also have squishy mages that don't love arrow fire, but we do manage to get up both arrow fend and mass protection pretty quickly. So, you know, hopefully we're not going to lose 11 of our own mages, but you know, we are up against, yeah, so, okay, there's no pan in here. That's good. So there isn't really much in the way of point buffers, right? And that's part of why we cast Swarm early. We're also getting help from our lifelong protection. We were just hoping to interrupt any kind of buff cycles. It does look like they managed to get Body Ethereal onto basically all of these guys, though. So that's definitely going to be a bit painful, since, you know, most of our damage is like mundane damage, and then, yeah, we're sending forward a bunch of skeletons. Speaking of mundane damage, we do have quite a few mages on advance and cast spells, right? So hopefully we're going to be seeing, they're probably, you know, doing some of the Frozen Heart to guys on the walls. Yeah, there you go. There's the Frozen Hearts coming in, and like, yeah, we're able to take them out without too much difficulty once the Frozen Heart spam moves forward. So that looked like it went pretty well. Probably what we should have just done, you know, to begin with. We do manage to lose one of our mages, the one that was turned into a spider. But, you know, she is twice born, so we're kind of happy to get him out of, like, this really, truly awful chassis. I'm not sure. I guess it'll just come back, yeah, as a size 1 white mage. So we got absolutely no benefit out of this transformation. And, like, we're still going to mess around with it, but, you know, maybe it's not the most efficient, best plan. But it has at least gotten us one super combatant who sadly did not manage to destroy all the monkeys. Came close, but still, this is a pretty good result for us in terms of the storm. Ew, we have some retreats. Not sure our Windmaster lost his nerve, but successfully retreated, so that's good. And we are happy to capture Pangaea, although I don't think they're eliminated. Let's see. Oh no, they are permanently vanquished, so someone else must have grabbed their last province, probably Marignan, since that's where they raided into. And then, yeah, it looks like Braga was also vanquished, so kind of spoiled the result of this. Not that I think there's really a lot of confusion, we're just really more interested to see what Jomon has. Like, yeah, there's not a whole lot in here. There's no leadership for this fiery imp. So, yeah, Jomon has been making really good use of mercenaries and continues to do so. But yeah, otherwise, like a relatively small army, not a ton of mage support, also a bit of danger here, you know, dudes and rogues. But yeah, like still managing to do pretty good work with a relatively small force. It doesn't really look like much in the way of kit or gems. Yeah, not even on this Tatsu. I think this is what they get to recruit from underwater, or might actually be a summon, because I don't think that Jomon has managed to make it underwater in this game, so I'm not sure how they would have been able to get their underwater recruits. But yeah, like I don't actually think we're really going to be able to learn all that much from what they're doing, because like mostly they're just using that summon and like some mercenaries, so not so useful for us as a scouting expedition. Ouch, they do lose their summon, so that definitely hurts. I think, no, there's no crossbowmen here, so maybe possibly some friendly fire. I mean, while these guys are pretty dangerous, they only have 42 hit points, 13 protection is not that great, and there's just not a whole lot you can do, because they don't have a lot of slots, so you can't actually like buff them that well. This definitely seems like a bit of a harder summon to use. So that probably hurts. And then they do lose another one of their mages, dudes in robes. This guy's not very expensive, so yeah, I don't think they're too worried about that. This is a throne, so, even though this is a bit painful, it's probably worth it for Jomon. And, overall, a pretty solid storm. And then we have a bunch of unexpected events. I'm sure these are great. There won't be any problems from this. And forces of nature trying to reclaim the land. I feel like there's probably a fertility cult here. And then let's see, a lumber construct has joined us. That's great. And then we get some nature gems. And then, okay, an evil necromancer. Fantastic. Looks like he's battling an animist who we decided to side with. That could be a mistake. I feel like the necromancer probably the more powerful of the two. And then villains trying to seize control of a province. Although I think this is where we PD dumped. So we probably don't have to worry about that. So we have 3 battles against the independents. Let's see which one this is. Okay, this is the forces of nature. These are some pretty pitiful forces of nature. We also have a bunch of mages here for some reason. Our site searcher gets driven off. That's annoying. But, it is what it is. I don't think these dudes in robes are going to be able to take this province. No, they and their Dryad mother were eliminated. Hopefully, okay, successful retreat. We like to see that. Still a little on the scary side. And we do lose a turn in terms of our site searching. Not that we were likely to find anything anyway. Here's this necromancer who has chosen to resurrect only lizards, interestingly. Of course, as soon as I say that, he resurrects some human corpses. And then this is on top of one of our forts, and it said we're going to get the help of an animist. I don't see any animist here. I don't know, maybe I'm just missing him. So yeah, or maybe, he's going to help us strategically, right? He's, helping from off the battlefield. Our fort province defense is not fantastic, and I think we're only at 15 PD, but this necromancer is not particularly fearsome, just a death 2, and his morale has failed since we killed most of his skeletons, so this is going to work out for us. We are happy about that. There's no animist here helping us out. Maybe that was a different battle. Maybe there's another necromancer. I don't think so, right? Yeah, these are the villains. So I'm not sure what happened with that animist. And this is not where we province defense dumped. That said, villains are pretty awful, so I think this is going to be a case where 6 PD does help. They are trying to snipe our commander, but the Veti are actually decently well armored, and these guys just have short bows. Once we close in, goodbye villains. So that does work out for us. And we hold on to all of our provinces, despite Misfortune 3's best efforts, so happy about that. And then, as I mentioned, both Pangaea and Raga were vanquished. Pangaea did a really good job holding on, delivered some really painful losses to us, particularly on top of Abyssia there, so nice work. And then, of course, for Raga, I think, they didn't make any friends. So, they exploded. They had a solid bless, did really well early on. But, then they got, 4 or 5 people attack them simultaneously. That's pretty tough to deal with. Though I will say that we didn't really ever see much in the way of magic out of Raga. So, strong sacred game, strong troop game. But, adding some magic to that maybe could tip the scales. And I will catch you guys after the jump. All right. This is the situation and what we're doing about it. On reflecting on this turn, in case it's not already apparent to you viewers, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't have an overall plan here. So we'll talk about what I'm planning on doing in the short term, but I've had some thoughts about long term, which are not in motion, but will hopefully be in motion in the coming turns. So in the short term, I do think we need to deal with Pythium. Obviously they're going to continue raiding us. Picking up another capital would be nice. But the other thing is it will put us, in pretty good position, right, to go after this throne if we want to. So to that end, we are moving forward, our main army, which is pretty reduced at this point. We don't really, everyone's on bodyguard, more or less. So, we don't actually have any, groups of units that are going to move forward and attack. So it's pretty much just, Frozen Heart and Skeleton production, with a few army-wide spells. And I'm not totally sure that's going to be enough to finish off Pythium. We'll see, but we should at least be able to press forward and hopefully eliminate some of these larger raiding groups or force them back into their capital so that we can, recapture this territory. Also, there's a good chance that there's, an army increasing, or rather one of the army size modifier items being used because, it's listing mainly these Misties, which are mages. And furthermore, they are foreign recruit mages, so you can't even get them out of your forts. So I think there's no way that they actually make up, 150, the majority of 150 units. Although also just now in checking on these units, I have noticed that Pythium has gone AI, so that changes matters considerably. I didn't know that when I was submitting this turn. Yeah, the AI is not going to put up as effective of a resistance, so yeah, we'll move in sooner rather than later. Although probably the province defense has been maxed out, so we may want to think about that a little bit. But yeah, we definitely want to move fast against the AI because they get a lot of cheats, so they'll start to produce way more stuff than they should be able to out of this fort. So we do still have a lot of raiders in the area. We might even collapse those into the main army just to provide a little bit of extra strength. But that's kind of the majority of what we're up to. We're also finishing off the fortification here. We're starting a fortification on top of this throne. We'll hopefully be starting a fortification here next turn. Unfortunately, we're behind the curve, right, because Raga just got eliminated, so all their candles disappeared, and so this throne is probably going to get claimed. There's already a temple here, so we're probably not. It's going to be a struggle to get our Dominion into this area. Which is not ideal, but also not the end of the world. The other main thing that I was planning on doing, and I don't know, we might still do, I was going to go after Patala again. So we're sneaking forward, with our super combatant, but this time we're going to go with foul vapors, right? Because I think there's enough chaff there. Obviously, the Nagas are not going to care about the poison, but if there's enough monkey chaff, he's not casting Serpent's Blessing on everyone, then the monkey chaff will die, and I think there's enough stuff to just trigger a general rout. We're also planning, on not giving them flying shoes, so once our automatic rout gets triggered, we won't be able to run away as quickly. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We have a bunch of point buffers that we're going to potentially send with them. Obviously, all of them would die, so, it'd be a bit of an expensive attack. And then the other thing we would do, I also didn't realize, you don't get the heat information if, I think it's your Dominion doesn't border the province, right? Because, here in these areas where our Dominion borders these provinces, we can see heat information. And, some of these are just straight neutral, which is what I thought Patala was at. But I don't think that's actually the case. Like, this is called 1, but we have a scout here. This is heat 3, so I'm thinking Patala is probably still fairly deep in the heat scales. And I was planning on casting some Woven Winter to try to reduce the heat scales so that we could actually send an army across the river. Because that's the other thing. Even if we can sit on top of Patala, we can't really easily crack it. There's a good chance that they'll sally out and kick our super combatant off. Or if we try to bring eagles on it, we might lose those eagles in a fight. But if we freeze this river, then we can get across it. So, we started sending out, pieces of an army that will meet up with this army. Some of the demons are fast enough that they can just, 2 province move into here. So the plan was this coming turn to Woven Winter and then Woven Winter again. And then hopefully that's enough to push it cold enough. We are also headed into winter, so then, that will help. And we may still do all that. It's pretty ridiculous, right? Because what triggered it is it just looks like, I moved a scout in here again. Gath is just making no effort, it seems like, to get rid of this capital. And while Patala has not really been raiding us, they're probably actually AI. No, so it looks like our host is chosen. They're enjoying this position more, I guess. So it's still actually human. So for whatever reason, they've chosen, not to raid us anymore. But if we leave this here long enough, certainly they will. And it's just annoying to have this here. But it doesn't really serve us, right? So let's talk bigger picture. I've talked somewhat about the throne situation. But now, I think there's probably, two ways forward that make the most sense and will result in the fewest number of direct enemies, right? So we have 3 thrones more or less under our control, and I was counting on those 2 thrones from Marignon, and then we can make up the remainder of the thrones by only fighting Utgard. And we've talked about that a bit. And Utgard is another preeminent power, which has its ups and downs. Like, it's going to be a difficult fight, but also people might not be interested in backstabbing me, while I'm fighting such a major power. Whereas, if we start bullying some of the minor powers, right, and making a lot of progress, then we might face a coalition. So I do think that that's a valid path forward, because we're going to be bordering this throne, hopefully, and we already border this throne. We're not too far away from this throne, so we don't actually have to beat Utgard completely. We just have to take like 2 citadels and what is no doubt soon to be a citadel. So I just had to take 3 throne citadels. Should be no problem. So obviously, that plan has some problems, so mostly Utgard. But the other big issue, right, is, okay, part of that plan is, like, let's just pick up these Marignon thrones, which easier said than done, right? Like, the Marrows, they're already next to this. I'm sure they already look at this throne and see it as their own. So, if we were to jump in and snipe it, which is pretty unlikely at this point anyway, since I've not ended my non-aggression pact with Marignon, and kind of was planning on not doing it, for a little while, so that they can hold off the Marrow as long as possible, because, we don't want to fight that player if we can avoid it. But if we're counting on Marignon's thrones, I don't really think we can avoid it, right? Like, I mean, there's no way that they're just going to let us, vulture these 2 thrones and, give us a thumbs up and be like, yeah, that's great, Vaettiheim. You just go do your thing and conquer the world. So I think, realistically, even with the Utgard plan, we need these thrones, right? So we're going to have to fight the merfolk. But of course, I don't want to, and they're a relatively large power, and they're going to be, painful to fight. So it's like, okay, we're going to fight them and Utgard. Like, that is now sounding like an even worse plan. So, I was looking at it, and there are other ways that we could make up the numbers. So if including the thrones from Marignon, there's actually a throne here that Falegra has, who's not in a very strong position. So adding them to our list of enemies, wouldn't be that bad. So that would be one of the replacement thrones that we, would no longer get from a war with Utgard, and then we'd already be fighting the merfolk. So this is pretty deep in their territory. But on the other hand, like, their capital, is down here. So it's close to their capital, but, it's not that far to drive. Like, we could, kind of come north around it. And so that would be the second throne that would make up the numbers, and then we could go underwater for the third throne. I mean, this one is neutral, and, Relay is not that big, and late age Relay, especially with the pop kill that they have. I think as time goes on, life gets a bit harder for them. So, going underwater is always tricky, but we do make a lot of skeletons. And, we do have that water mage province. So, as far as a land nation goes, we're in a bit better shape. And I mean, we just need to take this one province, which is still neutral. It's not even fortified. So clearly Relay thinks that, like, this is theirs. They don't have to worry about it. And also the fact that, it's turn 55 and there's, like, still, this is probably within their cap circle. Okay, at least it's not inside their cap circle. But, I mean, they're the only ones in the lake. And it's like, it's turn 55 and there's still an independent throne. That definitely is going to raise eyebrows. Now, I mean, there's some pretty nasty thrones out there. But, I mean, we've got a 9 here researched. No, that's a different game. Okay, so our research is not doing that well. But, I mean, still, at this point, I would expect, thrones to be taken. So, I'm guessing, and also, like, this war between Satis and Relay, I'm pretty sure has been going on a long time. All this to say that I don't think Relay is that strong. And there's a pretty good chance, right, that we're going to tangle with them anyway, right? This is a place that we already bumped with them. So, that's an alternate route that we could go. And, if that's the case, it's like, well, why antagonize Gath? If anything, Gath could provide, like, a potential ally, against the Marrow, although we do have to be a little bit careful since this throne is actually significantly closer to Gath than, to us. So, obviously people are going to go for thrones, so, we may end up fighting Gath in that case anyway, but at least then, it would be, like, hopefully we'd be close and we could just drive for this throne quickly. So anyways, that's some thoughts on the high-level situation. I haven't made decisions about which way we're going to go, but like I said, since we've been counting on the Marignon thrones, I just think that, this is probably the more likely play. We'll see if we actually go underwater, right? It's not impossible. Like, if we start doing well, Utgard attacks us, and then, maybe we make up the last throne, in some attacks against their territory. This, of course, assumes that, our enemies leave us the luxury of choosing where we want to go. We might not get that luxury. In terms of more short-term stuff, we do have a decent amount of forging this turn, trying to put together some kit. We do have at least, this fellow who needs to be geared out. Eventually, we also will want to gear out this Archdevil, who is headed over, to the steel ovens. We want him to forge a fire booster, because that way we can get we're missing a fire booster for some of our enchantresses here, so that they can then start forging rune smashers, which will be useful for us for some of our magic penetration stuff. And then we were wasting more blood slaves on other vanilla blood summons. So we're going to bind a Heliophagus. This is just another high-level vanilla blood summon. I haven't used them before. Again, all of these summons, people argue about, but they are quite costly. And, for instance, this guy that we just got, a Fire 4, sure, that's powerful. 62 hit points. It's not like he's bad, but it's just, is he really worth, all the extra blood slaves? Probably, just get another vampire that's immortal. Speaking of our vampire, we're probably just going to park this first one here on this throne, because they generate thralls, which are pretty useful siege defense. And so yeah, we just like to get some siege defense in this throne province. We'll probably also use him to make a few more vampires, but we'll probably start saving for Illwinter in the next couple turns. We're not really going to go nuts with our vampire production. So yeah, I think that more or less covers turn 55.